Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Our guest today is Mufti Asif Umar, Imam of the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis in Manchester, Missouri. Mufti is a title given to one who has specialized in Islamic jurisprudence and has the authority to give legal verdicts in Islamic law. Mufti Asif was born and raised in the St. Louis area. After finishing the 8th grade at the Academy of Sacred Heart in St. Charles, he began studying the religion of Islam. He enrolled at the Institute of Islamic Education in Elgin, Illinois, where he completed the memorization of the entire Quran and an intensive Islamic Studies course. The coursework included Arabic, Quran, Islamic Jurisprudence, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and much more. Following graduation in 2007, Mufti Asif enrolled at the institution in Durban, South Africa, where he completed a 2-year postgraduate course specializing in Islamic law. Following that, he spent a few months in Cairo, Egypt, where he studied spoken Arabic. After returning to the U.S., he taught at an institution in Virginia near Washington, D.C. He has served as Imam of the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis for the past 3 years. Mufti Asif Umar, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you very much, Lee, for having me.
Well, we're very pleased to have you here to answer some questions. There is, in my opinion, a real lack of information in the general public about what Islam is and what Islam isn't. So let's start with France a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Right. Today is January 20th, and about 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I think that there were a couple of young men who, under the banner of Islam, used weapons to kill a whole bunch of people at a newspaper in Paris, France. Now, there are some people who want to say, well, this is Islam. And then, of course, then there's others that say, no, this has nothing to do with Islam.
Yes.
I would like you to address that.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought this up. It's very important for the public to know what true Islam is. And unfortunately, these individuals who committed this horrific act, they have no representation of the Islamic religion whatsoever. And it's unfortunate that these people, along with groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram in Nigeria, which I'm sure you've heard about, horrific acts that they've done as well, these groups have nothing to do with what Islam stands for. Islam stands for peace. Islam stands for being respectful towards all other faiths. And these people are misguided when it comes to Islam. And I'm sure, unfortunately, media doesn't cover the various statements that many Islamic organizations across the world put out every time an event like this occurs because of Al-Qaeda or ISIS or these individuals. I'm not sure what group these individuals were a part of, who they were linked to, but unfortunately, it seems as though whenever a Muslim is behind the gun, so to say, that's when the coverage is at its max when it comes to Islam. But when a Muslim does something good, which the majority of Muslims across the world are moderate Muslims who are normal law-abiding citizens, it doesn't get as much coverage. For example, we can just look at this France incident, in itself. The first person who was killed was a French Muslim police officer, who was actually guarding the building where, those cartoonists were doing their job. And
Charlie Hebdo.
Yes, Charlie Hebdo, correct. And the incident on the day where those the murderers were killed, on the day where I believe there were 2 hostage situations going on. One of the hostage situations was in a kosher market, I believe, and the one who was saving people inside that market, he was actually hiding the hostages inside a walk-in refrigerator. and he was an African Muslim. So we can see just in that one example in itself, you have these people who are completely out of line, who are not doing what Islam teaches, while you have two people who did practice Islam in the proper way. They're actually protecting society, they're respecting society and respecting other religions. So those are the Muslims that, you know, mainstream Muslims stand with and stand for, not these killers who are, you know, unfortunately, because of the lack of media coverage of what good Islam does, you know, many people think the face of Islam is, you know, these people who commit acts of terrorism. That's unfortunate.
Why do you think that people like these brothers, people who are part of ISIS, including that leader, and I'm blanking on his name, the leader of ISIS,
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
Thank you. Yes, Baghdadi. Why do they think that their thinking is more in line with Islam than what you think is the mainstream of Islam?
Unfortunately, it's due to misguidance. You know, these people are not following Islam the proper way. The acts that they are doing, you know, I believe they're more politically motivated. They're not religiously motivated in any way whatsoever.
Pause there for just 1 second. I want to say this. From my reading,
yes,
Islam has been two things. It's been a religion, but it's also been a political movement, and I'm talking all the way back to the very origins of the Islamic, back to the 6th century, when it was a political movement in which it was organizing and eventually conquering large areas. And so whenever you're administering and have under your control territory and you're acting as a government, that's political, right? Okay.
Yes,
as opposed to the, what we consider religion. Are these guys more interested in setting up a political state and being political leaders?
I believe so. I mean, again, back in the days of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and the reason I say peace and blessings be upon him is because we as Muslims have been commanded that every time his name is mentioned, we send salutations upon him, as we believe that the Prophet Muhammad is the greatest of the creation of God, and he has commanded us in the Quran that every time his name is mentioned, we send peace and salutations upon him. So at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, as you know, he was asked to eradicate the beliefs of worshiping idols. And this is what was going on, at his time. Unfortunately, at that time, the people who were idol worshippers, they were, committing acts which were very evil acts. For example, when they had newborn daughters, they would bury them alive. And this was such an unfortunate case. Women were treated in a horrific manner at that particular time as well. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came, he took away all of these beliefs. He gave women rights. He gave women the right to inherit, the right to, the right to not be disciplined in particular ways, with their from their spouses, etc. But Islam, as you said, Islam spread throughout the lands, and when it spread throughout the lands, there were certain rules when it came to what they call jihad. Jihad, first of all, has a very large misinterpretation.
It has a
nowadays.
Bad connotation.
Exactly.
Right, it's a bad word.
Yes. No, well, it's not a bad word.
Well, no, it is in the public mind.
Yes, in the public mindset, it is a bad word. You are right. And people have, I wanted to actually take this opportunity to explain what that word is. The word jihad means a struggle. And in the Quran, when people cherry pick verses and they see, one verse that says, kill the infidel wherever you see them, unfortunately, people are cherry picking these verses and thinking that all Muslims are out there to kill other non-Muslims. This is completely false and completely against what Islam teaches. There is a context to this particular verse that was valid at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and that is that in his time he was, of course, chosen as a messenger of God, and he was asked to spread Islam, spread the oneness of God, worshiping the one true God. And what you can say is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, what we talk about nowadays. We are so fortunate to be living here in the United States where we have freedom of speech and we have freedom of religion and to follow our faiths. So that's one thing that did not exist at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, when he started to spread the oneness of God and say that what you are doing is false, and God has chosen me to be a prophet and to teach you to worship the one true God. So they took exception to this, and they wanted to kill the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they wanted to kill the rest of the believers as well. So out of self-defense, God commanded him in the Quran that out of self-defense, if they come and attack you, then you can fight with them. And that was only those who were in the battle itself, meaning the soldiers, the men. You leave the women, you leave the children, you leave infrastructure, you don't destroy anything like that. So
these would be like the Byzantines or the Persians that were, as Islam was moving into those areas.
Yes, into that came a bit later on. I'm talking about the early days of Islam.
Century.
Yes, like in the area of
7th
Mecca.
century.
So that's what I wanted to talk about, because if you look in the Quran, there are other verses that completely contradict the verse that I was talking about. For example, if just one innocent person is killed, then it is as if entire humanity has been killed. So it also shows, and then another verse that says there's no compulsion in religion. And people say that Islam was spread by the sword and they forced people to become Muslims, which is completely not true as well. Many non-Muslims lived under Islamic rule, and they lived peacefully under Islamic rule as well. They were given a choice by the Muslims. If you would like to live, obviously they had to pay a tax called the jizya, and the reason for that tax was so that they would be protected just as a Muslim citizen would be protected. Muslims pay what they call a zakah every year, which is 2.5% of one's wealth goes to the poor.
Kind of like tithing.
Yes, exactly. So it's a requirement that whoever owns a certain amount of wealth, they have to pay 2.5% every year. For a person who is living under Islamic rule who was non-Muslim, that zakah, what it's called, that annual charity, that did not apply. So for them, it was an annual tax called the jizya. And under that tax, they would be living just as a Muslim would be living under Islamic rule, meaning they would live in peace. They would, if anyone would come to attack the country, they would also be protected just as a Muslim citizen would be protected. So,
okay.
Yes.
Let's back up just a minute.
Okay.
And now we're going to do just a little bit of history lesson here.
All right.
So the Prophet was born at about 570
Yes.
on the American calendar. Muslims use a different calendar system?
Correct, yes. The Muslims use what they call the Hijri calendar. What that is right now we're in year number 1436. And it started from the time where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers, they made the migration from Mecca to Medina in Saudi Arabia. And the reason why that migration was made was because in the early days of Islam, the Muslims faced such great persecution from the idol worshippers at the time that they were not able to...
This is back in Mecca.
Yes, this is back in Mecca. They were not able to practice their religion freely. They were not able to preach their religion. So
why was Medina so more forgiving?
Well, the people of Medina were known to be, much more soft. And, actually the Prophet Muhammad, what he did was he sent a delegation of people beforehand to go to Medina and to teach them Islam, to teach them the religion. And many of them actually accepted Islam, before the Prophet Muhammad and the main group actually came. So they were a lot more welcoming. They were actually called the Ansar in Arabic, who are the helpers. So they were so welcoming that when the group from Mecca came, remember the group from Mecca had to leave everything behind. They left their homes, they left their wealth, their belongings, everything they had to leave back. They had to basically migrate with absolutely nothing. So these people were so helpful to them that they actually offered, half their own wealth to the ones who migrated because of the love that they had, because they felt that, we're all united under this one religion and under worshiping one God, that, we really need to help these people.
So this is in the early part of the 7th century, somewhere after 610 or something like that?
Yeah, it's after 610. 610 was when the prophethood itself, the Prophet Muhammad was age 40 when he actually received prophethood. So I can't, really think of the
exact
English year exactly, but
we're up to the early part of the 600s is when all of this action first begins in Islam.
Yes.
And so then the Prophet lives to 632, I believe. Yes.
Yes. Well, he was 63.
Right.
He was 63 when he passed away.
Right.
So,
then there was a succession struggle.
Yes.
Now, was this a succession struggle for leadership of the religion, or a succession struggle for leadership of the ground that Islam now controlled politically?
Well, it's both. It was both. After the Prophet Muhammad passed away, there was no other prophet to come. Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the final messenger of God, meaning no other messenger will come after he passes away. So now, obviously, for organization purposes, you need a leader, what they called the caliph or the khalifa in Arabic language, to be the ruler, mostly for, obviously for religious reasons as well, but mainly for the lands, for political, reasons as well. So
there's this problem.
Yes.
Yeah, there's this problem as to who comes next, and this creates the two main sects
Sunni
that
and
we know
Shia.
today.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So
there
describe
were
that.
Yeah. So there were a group of people who believed that Abu Bakr, who was the Prophet's closest companion, he was the first person to accept Islam. He was also his closest companion. So many felt that he, as the closest companion, should be the one to lead the Muslims. He had kind of seniority, I guess you can say. While others believed that this power should be kept within the family. And Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he did not have any grown-up sons. His infant sons that he had earlier in his life, they passed away in infancy. So he did not have any sons who grew up. But his son-in-law, who's Ali, he was married to, obviously, his daughter Fatima. So many felt, some felt that it should be kept within the family of the Prophet, within the household of the Prophet, and he should be the next one who should be succeeding. So there were differences of opinion, but
it didn't work out for Ali.
For Ali, yes. But even though Ali did become the leader a bit later on,
right.
Yes,
so you have
Abu
Bakr becomes the next leader after the Prophet.
After the Prophet,
and then
followed by Umar, who was also a very close companion of the Prophet.
And very energetic.
Yes, he was very energetic. I'm sure you've read about him. He was very strict in following the Quran, in the way that they were all strict in that way, but he was known to be in that sense. And the Prophet Muhammad actually mentioned one saying about Umar, that if there was a prophet to come after me, then it would have been Umar, because of the way he was. But Abu Bakr was more senior and he had more seniority. So, he was there with the Prophet from the very beginning through all the difficulties.
At this point, when Abu Bakr becomes the leader instead of Ali becoming the leader, at what point are we now having these, I don't know, is there different religious practices between Sunni
No. Well,
and Shia?
Now there are, but at that point there were no difference in religious practices. There was this difference of opinion at that time. But people accepted it eventually, that Abu Bakr is the Khalifa. They accepted it, and there were no issues. It's just later on.
So it's like 24 years later, then Ali finally succeeds to leadership.
Correct.
So now you would think, all right, So he got there.
Yeah.
He didn't come right away, but
exactly,
he got
but
there.
he got there eventually.
Right.
Yes.
So why
he was younger, too, than
must have been
other seniors.
right.
Yes, exactly.
So why then? And I guess in Islam, the vast majority are Sunni.
Sunni, yes,
right?
That is correct.
And you're only going to find in Iran
and parts of Iraq, mainly, you will find Shias.
Right.
Yes,
but
like
it's not a big group.
It's not really that big. I think.
So what is it
maybe
that
than
Shias want today that they can't seem to fold themselves into the mainstream?
There's just difference in creed. The ultimate belief that Sunnis and Shias have are the same, meaning the Shahada, the declaration of faith, which is there's no God but God, and the Prophet Muhammad is the final messenger. That is the exact same for both Sunnis and Shias. But over time, there were, some differences in creed. For example, later generations that came, they disliked the companions of the Prophet Muhammad who were Khalifa before Ali. So the three companions, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Osman, who were before Ali, they disliked them to a point where they actually, started cursing at them and
at the time.
No. This
later
was
on.
later on. Yes,
okay.
This was later on. So they started cursing at them, and they now have beliefs. The Shias have beliefs now that they follow an Imam, and they believe that these Imams were chosen by God. These are certain actions which are, against what true Islam teaches nowadays. So. There are just some differences in creed when it comes to that. For example, in Islamic law, the Quran is number one in source of Islamic law. The number two source are the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. But the Shia group, they do not accept many of the sayings of the Prophet. Many of them, especially the ones that are narrated by the companions who they curse. Yeah, so they don't accept those. And a lot of Islamic law comes from the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, because the Quran is just a very general guide, but it was cleared up by the Prophet Muhammad himself and his sayings.
So Islam goes from being in the early part of the 600s, located in a very, very narrow area of what's now Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And by the middle of the 700s, it has expanded to where it is throughout the southern Mediterranean.
Yes.
In other words, across
North Africa,
from basically
yes.
from Morocco
Correct.
all the way around to the Indus River, I think.
Yes, to the Indus River.
That would be India.
Some mention that, some of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad even reached as far as China, as far as southern China as well, very close to.
So,
River,
sort of Marco Polo.
Yeah.
So. It's a long walk. But so Islam grows both in area, and it grows in wealth all the way up to about 1400 AD, and then all of a sudden then it begins to I don't want to say implode, but
yes.
it begins to shrink.
Its
influence begins to shrink as Western civilization begins to grow. All the way up really until the 20th century when that begins to reverse.
That is correct. Yes.
So we got about 5 more minutes here.
Okay.
Time just has really gone by pretty quick. Is there areas that you want to cover that we haven't covered?
Yes.
If it is, let's do it now.
All right, correct. Well, I mean, again, I think it's important that, that the people understand about Islam and what true Islam is. For example, this particular case that happened in Paris, for example, it's labeled as an attack on freedom of speech. And freedom of speech is an excellent thing. It's something I advocate and I totally believe in myself. And if it wasn't for freedom of speech, how can we speak about religion and practice our religion as a minority? Exactly.
In this huge group.
So that's what I'm saying. But even Islamically, and even, in our normal lives for everyone, there's actually a limit to freedom of speech. One cannot threaten anyone with anything or harass someone or, as they say nowadays, shout fire in a theater. and expect to just get away with it. Similarly, in Islam, there are limits to freedom of speech. You cannot mock someone or dishonor someone or slander someone or backbite someone. You know, God clearly mentions in the Quran that you cannot say these things. You cannot lie, you know, disrespecting one another. These are things which are forbidden in Islam. So there are limits to the freedom of speech. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, Charlie Hebdo, the cartoonists, you know, of course, they were dishonoring and mocking the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in such a horrific way. I don't know if you saw any of the cartoons. You know, I did see.
Listen, I understand. I
Yes.
understand from a Muslim's point of view what they saw was horrific. In the same way as when
Yes.
Christians saw, there was some artist who had, I forget what it was like Christ in a bottle of urine or something like that. And, you know, Christians just went nuts over this, you know, but not to the point. You just don't see Christians go so crazy as to start burning things down. Whereas in Pakistan, I hear recently that there have been people who have gone over the edge.
Yes, and I was going to mention that as well. You know, obviously, reaction-wise, you don't go to the point what those two shooters did by going and shooting people. No, that's not what you do. But at the same time, you don't just sit back and, you know, let anyone do anything, especially to the, you know, to someone who is as beloved to 1.7, 1.8 billion people around the world than the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And, you know, I think it just opens up a lot of things. I don't want to, you know, start getting into politics, but, you know, Muslims in France have not been treated the same way as other citizens. You know, it's known. You know, many of them are from Africa.
I didn't feel good about the French when I was over there. So, go ahead.
I mean, you know, there's a lot of, you know, unfortunately, racism and bigotry. And, you know, I wanted to also speak about, you know, our own situation over here. You know, I know this might not be the proper time to talk about Ferguson, for example, but, you know, as
do it fast because we're running out of time.
I'm almost done. But as a minority, you know, as a Muslim who is a minority in the community itself, you know, it really affected us as well. You know, of course, we want justice and peace for all human beings, no matter what race there is. And, you know, it just seems like nowadays, with everything that is going on, you know, you just don't see that, especially with the way that minorities are treated. So, again,
well, we're going to have a longer discussion about this on another occasion. I find what you had to say very, very, very interesting. I hope that people can understand what you said, especially at the beginning about there are political people and then there's religious people.
Exactly.
And you represent the religious side.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, final thing I wanted to mention at the very end, just quickly. We offer tours at the mosque, at our Islamic Foundation, and we're always welcoming. We want people to come and have dialogue with us and to tour the mosque and to really find out what true Islam is.
We got to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to be on YouTube here, so you can listen to this again or show it to your friends. Go to Conversation with Lee Presser and look up Mufti Umar. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye.